Hey guys, it's GHP, and welcome to our patch 1.28 rundown. Today I'm joined by two members of Eternal Warcry, that would be Missing Toes and the Overmaster.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey, how's it going?
And we're just going to review all the changes. We're going to start with Constructed, because that's what we all kind of specialize in, and we'll go from there. So let's get started with Steward of the Past, the Statuary made it. Shit.
Oh my
Get
god.
it again.
See, okay, I'll explain this. So, this isn't the first time we try recording this, but my audio crapped out. So, they decided to ask me, how do I pronounce what I would call statutory maiden instead of statuary maiden?
Sounds so wrong. Oh
I know,
my
wow,
God.
I never
So many
realized
levels,
it. Oh my. So, that current statuary maiden did not get changed. It just became more clear in its writing. But Steward of the Past did get changed. I think the changes to Steward, which is he no longer silences enemies entering the void, is a pretty big deal. It affects things like Sporefolk. It affects things re-entering from, say, like a Haunting Scrape. It no longer hits something with Revenge. It no longer hits Entomb triggers. It makes that makes Dawnwalker better, but we'll talk about that card later, because I don't think that's a problem anymore. It makes Dark Return worst. It makes Dark Return better. But I think this nerf might be enough to push Steward out of decks, or maybe just to the sideboard. I think this is an effect that was valuable enough that it was part of the reason you played Steward, but not the only reason. But I don't think a 4-mana 3/5 Deadly is particularly good now. It still has the Enter the Battlefield effect, which is still relevant. Let's say you're against Reanimator, you might be able to come down and just hose their yard. But it's much less of a big deal, and it's so much easier to fight through this card for any of the decks that it used to actually hose by itself. So I think Steward may not be seeing much play anymore. What do you guys think?
I agree with pretty much everything you just said. Steward of the Past is basically... it's going to be I think people are still going to play it as sort of an old guard type of thing, and it's still going to be effective in the matchups that it's going to be effective in, for the most part at least. At least it's going to nerf. It's still going to nerf your Dark Returns, your Haunting Screams, your Grasping of Shadows and whatnot, specifically for things like Reanimator. If you're seeing a Reanimator on ladder, I still think this is a very powerful card. However, I think the Entomb part obviously going away affects a ton of things. I believe Missing Toes is going to tell us about that. But the fact is that Steward of the Past it's going to be very hard. It's going to be harder to play with this card now. You're going to have this kind of thing happening where you're playing against a Reanimator deck, and they're going to discard something, and you're going to Steward of the Past. You're going to hold on to your Steward of the Past now, whereas jamming them before was actually an effective strategy, and then you're relying on the Reanimator player to remove it. And now you have to do it the other way around. You cannot. You were supposed to do that before. You're supposed to hold on to your stewards and wait for them to discard their threat and do it before. However, now it's going to punish you much more severely for not holding on to the Steward of the Past and just jamming it straight away.
Yeah, you have to set up Steward now. You have to, like, Face Aegis is at an all-time high, and you're going to have to be able to pop a Face Aegis and drop it at the right moment to actually get value out of it. I think the main thing here is that Statuary Maiden and Steward now do vastly different things. Like, Stewie is a one-time effect. It's basically a spell on a stick that will hit the graveyard and do bad things against decks that rely on graveyard recursion. But Statuary Maiden, like, it does a completely different thing with the units that come out of play, and it affects Entomb, which Steward no longer does, and that's really big. I mean, Soulfire Drake is going to be a problem for Feln. I think Rindra takes its place in most builds of Feln control going forward, if there is a Feln control going forward. That kind of remains to be seen. But Yeah, I think Stewie might be a 2 of on ladder decks, and it's going to be a sideboard tool for tournaments. I don't see it getting a lot of play after this.
Cool. I think we've covered Stewart, so let's move on to Dawn Walker, which is a card I wasn't expecting, but I think it needed to change at some point. Costing Quadra time to return from the void is a lot. Even in a 2-faction deck, I can hear echo shit. Cards like Wobear Behemoth and like Combray, sometimes you still have issues casting, and that's 3 time. The big change this does is it stops the games you go, Dawnwalker, you kill Dawnwalker, play Titan, well, this game's probably over. That was a situation that came up pretty often in Dawnwalker decks, and this will fix that. It also stops you from, say, playing Dawnwalker in your random bring-in deck, or your random Tavrod, or your random Reanimator deck. It makes you have to at least be playing 2-faction, maybe just mono time. I think this is a pretty big nerf to Dawnwalker, but I can understand it with the fact that Steward got nerfed. I do think it's worth noting that with Dawnwalker now getting what I'm going to call gutted, that's a really big deal for any weapon style deck, which when you asked what is the best way to beat this, the 2 best answers were Dawnwalker and Aggro. Dawnwalker got gutted, Aggro gets hurt, but we'll talk about that later. I think Dawnwalker is probably not going to see any more play, which although I think the card's awesome, I'm very okay with this change because I think the more the game develops, the more of a problem this card will be.
Yeah, kind of agree with pretty much everything there. Dawnwalker really did need a nerf eventually. It's already been nerfed once. It used to come back into play unexhausted. So Dawnwalker has been a problem child for Eternal since the beginning. And I think that, I just think that moving forward, in order to open up more design space for the game of Eternal, I think that Dawnwalker needed this kind of nerf. It's still pretty powerful in mono time specifically, and believe it or not, as much as I hate to admit it, and as much as other people perhaps hate to admit it, mono time is actually a pretty strong deck. So the fact that Dawnwalker still goes into that strategy is, it's still pretty good in that deck. In terms of things like Praxis or Elysian and whatnot, I think I think that this basically kills the strategies that were available before to those decks. An example, the jam Titan on jam Dawnwalker, jam Titan on attack with your Dawnwalker into their drop, and Dawnwalker dies. Now it's back. Those kinds of strategies in the multi-faction, multi-influence factions is just it basically kills those. And yeah, it's true. If now that Dawnwalker has gone from the meta, I think that Armory is going to be kind of a scary deck, to be honest, because I don't see any nerfs to Armory in this particular patch. So I think Armory got a huge buff. Basically, we basically buffed the best player in the game, Tony G, to another level. That's what happened here.
That's some big words.
I kind of disagree. I think Dawnwalker would still be fine in any faction pair that has crests. Like, you're still going to see him in Elysian decks. You're going to see him in Praxis decks. This is really another nerf to killers. Like, Xenon already has power base issues with all of the influence that it requires early in the game. So I can see them cutting Dawnwalker and maybe just not existing as a playable archetype for a while. But I think you still play this card for its anti-aggro effect, because those games go long. You're gonna have 5 power units that you drop, and you'll get your Dawnwalkers back eventually. You just won't have the explosive broken turns early that this card used to provide.
Okay, I think that's an interesting perspective. I didn't really think about it being still playable with crests. I definitely think without crests in the faction, it's not playable.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. All right,
like,
go ahead.
I think it's still a good anti-control card. It just doesn't have that early game powerhouse effect that it used to.
I think they were planning on changing Dawnwalker to something a long time ago, and that's the reason why they decided to do both in the same patch update. The Dawnwalker and the Steward of the Past change because they kind of go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't change one without the other, really.
Well, speaking of cards that can't be changed without the other, that was so smooth.
Right.
Let's look at the Elysian Trailblazer and Pathfinder. They both now cost one extra other influence. I think the Trailblazer is irrelevant. I think it's only got the extra primal because they felt like nerfing Pathfinder, and they wanted them to be symmetrical in their cycle. The fact that they made Pathfinder double time when the deck it was seeing playing is 4 faction, it can hurt. Now that deck got some buffs in this patch, quite a few. We already looked at Steward, so I think this change, although it's a nerf, will not really affect the deck too much. It may affect how they actually build their power base, but I don't think this is enough nerf for like Echo Macto not to play Elysian Pathfinder, for example. The card is still really powerful, even though it doesn't see play in many decks. I think the decks that want it really want it, and I think making it cost 1 extra time is nowhere near enough to make it cut from decks. What do you guys think?
What you think that you think Trailblazer was a terrible card? I mean, Pojo probably thinks it's a sweet card, right?
Pojo thinks Static Bolt's good.
I think Elysian Trailblazer was a very sad nerf. But yeah, in terms of Elysian Pathfinder, yeah, they're gonna have to retool the mana base. I don't think you can actually run 3 faction anymore. You can't run 4 faction anymore. Yeah, you can't run 4 faction anymore. The rise to the challenge version, or I mean the crown version. I actually think the crown version doesn't even suffer at all from this nerf, even though I don't think that deck is very playable. But I think a 3 faction version of Echo Macto can still carry forward into the future, even through this, and I think it's still going to be very, very powerful because of a certain other upgrade that we will be talking about later on.
I have nothing to say about Trailblazer. That card has no interest for me. The Pathfinder thing, it probably reduces the chances of Echo Macto being 4 faction, but there's already really good players like Unearthly who are brewing 3 faction Echo Macto to ruin people's days for the near future. I
already did brew it. It's not bad, but I need some tweaks for sure. We'll see what.
He's got a list up in the engine room already. I kind of want to go play it after this.
Now, speaking of tweaks, Withering Witch, I don't like that. Apparently, they did this because it's confusing. I think that's crap. The fact that it now hits undamaged enemies means you can't go like turn 7 Vera's Favor Witch. You can't go Storm Witch.
Wait, you can still go Witch into Vera's Favor.
Yeah, but if you didn't have 7th power.
You have to wait another turn.
Okay, yeah. I think Withering Witch was already bad when it got nerfed to a 1-1 instead of a 1-4. Now the fact that it only hits undamaged enemies means A, your play can be really telegraphed because you can't do like those Vera's Favors turns. But this also makes your attacks just significantly worse. I think this might be the last nail in the coffin for Withering Witch. It was already pretty bad, and I think, especially with the other nerfs to Feln that it received, I think Withering Witch is probably gone from Feln control.
I don't think so. I think the fact that you have to order your lightning storms in the correct order now, which is what they've wanted you to order it in this correct order since the beginning of time, right? There's a few things that it hurts. Obviously, you can't do the Harbinger into Witch play off of Vara now, which is unfortunate.
Yeah,
However,
that's a big one.
Everything else is still fine. I mean, how often did you attack with your units and then just not block, right? Now they can just block, and you're just not getting any incidental damage. Feln isn't about dealing damage. I think that this was. I still think that Witch is going to be used in Feln control. I think the effect is very, very powerful. Yeah.
I think if Phone Control continues, because they have no better option. Like, there's not much they can do in the way of mass removal, so it's still going to have that function. But they basically dropped a house on this card. I think it might be done. I don't know. I'll have to play with it and see how it goes. And like, yeah, the Harbinger into Witch off of Vera is a great play, and I love doing it. But it doesn't come up that often. I think the turn 7 play with Vera's favor is much more likely and comes up much more often. I just can't see playing this card anymore. Really, I can't.
All right, well, let's move on. Black Sky Harbinger, +1 attack. So, regardless of how this looks, I hate to break it to the world. Black Sky Harbinger got nerfed. It getting hit by Vanquish, which is apparently the most played non-shadow card that's not power right now. And because Vanquish is a card that is so powerful, you kind of need to play it in every Justice deck, or the majority of Justice-based decks. And Harbinger was nice for Felm because they didn't have many good targets for Vanquish, except for Vera and Champ. And when they're already in play, they've already gotten value. They've already 2-for-1, 3-for-1, whatever. Giving decks a actual Vanquish target is not good. You play Black Sky because it comes down, it flies, it races, and it can come down and really close out a game against aggro, or just end the game on the spot if, say, your kids maybe rally. The extra attack I don't think is that relevant. It does mean it could block something like Throne Warden and get upside, or Seraph, or an owl, which of course some people on this team know more about than others. But I think Harbinger did get nerfed. I still think the card's good, but I definitely think the fact that it gets hit by Vanquish is enough to say that it got nerfed instead of a buff. Sure, there are matchups where Vanquish isn't evolved, where getting extra attack is good. I mean, it now does dodge Suffocate, but that card was kind of getting worse anyways. I think this is definitely a nerf, just not a huge one.
I just completely disagree with everything about that. Just giving you an extra Vanquish target isn't killing the card. I think the fact that it can, it lowers the amount of turns it takes to kill your opponent, which is something the Black Sky Harbinger itself was actually pretty hard at doing. You had to have other cards built around Harbinger in order to actually be able to kill off your opponent quickly. Yeah, sure, it was nice for racing and whatnot, but you still need your champions. You still need your Varas in order to finish off your opponent. You might not need that as much now. I think this is for sure a buff to the card. The fact that it gets hit by Vanquish, like that's probably it's relevant, but it also now no longer gets hit by Suffocate. And yes, Suffocate wasn't used as much as Vanquish. We don't know. The metagame changes, right? The metagame changes. Suffocate actually hits more targets in AP mid than Vanquish, right? So other decks can, it hits the relevant targets in Tavrod and Doom. But I mean, that's just a metagame adjustment. I think the fact that it is just +1 attack is actually completely a buff to the card. Yeah, I just think that's buff to the card.
I think it's great against non-justice aggro. I think it's going to be horrible for Feln going forward against weapons decks. Like, if you're running into Armory or Akaria Blue, you're no longer going to be playing Stewards. Your Harbingers get hit by Vanquish. Your Rindras are going to get hit by Vanquish. They're both going to get hit by Island's Choice. Like, it makes a hard matchup worse, because often your path to victory in those decks was sticking one of these 3/5 units that couldn't be rune hammered down and couldn't be hit by most of their removal, and just slowly grinding them out. And Felm doesn't even have that option now. Like,
so they're going to target your Black Star and they're going to kill it with a Vanquish, right? That's going to take away that removal from much more important targets in Champion of Cunning.
Right, but it's not their only removal. Like, you're giving them value earlier than in a matchup that's already horrific. I think it's a lateral. It will help against aggro, but I don't know how aggro exists with these changes. It's like,
yeah, that's true.
they've hit him pretty hard.
Yeah. If we want to talk about cards that have hit aggro pretty hard, Devastating Setback was quite a, you know where this is going, devastating change. So it costs 1 less mana, but the -2/-2 is only this turn. I think this card is very good now. I really want to play this card. I think it's now costed effectively enough that in the matchups you don't want to go -2/-2, it's still good. Obviously, like, it's worse than Storm, and it's worse than Sabotage on their own, but together it might be good enough to be better than those cards because of its flexibility. I could definitely see, let's say Felt Control survives. I could see this card replacing Lightning Storm, because often it's turn 3 Lightning Storm you're looking for. Now it is Double Shadow instead of where you're trying to turn on your Primal early, so maybe you tweak the mana base a little bit. But I think this card is at a really powerful spot now. I think it's going to see a lot of play. I think anything like maybe Archerport Control could use it. I think most control decks that are in Shadow realistically are going to use this card now. I'm a big fan and I'm really excited to play with it. I just think it's flexible enough and cheap enough now to be good.
Yeah, this is basically the Banish of this patch. Banish, of course, got moved from 4 to 3 cost, and this also moved from 4 to 3. And I think that that seals the deal on this being a very, very powerful card. It's going to see play in pretty much every single shadow-based control deck. Whether or not it's Argenport, whether or not it's Felon, what have you, right? Even Stonescar, maybe Stonescar mid or Stonescar control, that deck that Ilya always reminisces about, right? Maybe Devastating Setback is okay in that deck. I'm not sure about that one, but I think that this was definitely a huge buff, and also it nerfs aggro. In the meantime, I think aggro got a huge nerf because this card got reduced in cost. Now we actually have 2 Lightning Storms. That's crazy. That's
not okay.
Insane.
Toes?
Yeah, you guys said it all. They made a borderline playable card a very good card, and that's that. We're going to see this card going forward.
Alright, well, a card that I know Overmaster's kind of excited from is Torgov. So they made it so for him to get +3/+3, it's now 10 cards you avoid instead of 15. Yes, you didn't, you decreased this by 1/3, but 10 to 15 is a huge difference. Because, for example, early game, you got these random Seek powers in your hand, boom, 2 cards in your graveyard. You cast your card, draw another card. It's really easy to get to 10, especially if you're playing a card like Quarry, for example, or anything else that puts things in the graveyard. I don't know how good he is, because when he's not turned on, he's still just a 4-mana 4/5 that can loot. But when he's a 4-mana 7/8 that can loot, is really, really powerful. I think the card is, like, this is obviously a buff to the card that's not really debatable. I think the card might be playable in some sort of mid-range deck now, especially one that has some way to fill up its graveyard in some manner, or at least doesn't fill it up incredibly slowly.
I agree with everything there. I mean, it's yeah. I will say I'm pretty excited about a 4/5 for 4 that can loot, and it actually not only do you just cast spells in order to get Torgov off, if it hits twice, let's say once even, it's already milling itself. It's already increasing its chances becoming a 7/8. Later on in the game, if you draw Torgov off the top, it's a lot easier to just slam it as a 4-mana 7/8, which is a pretty big upside. I think that FTP Moment might play this.
That's interesting.
I was already kind of wanting to play this in the deck anyway, and then now it gets this huge buff, right? I think that moving forward, perhaps that we might see Torgoff see a little more play than what he was seeing before. I still don't think the card's insane, right? But incidentally drawing a 7/8 is pretty nice later on in the game.
Yeah, I've always liked Torgoff. I've always wanted him to be good. I hope this is enough for him to see play. I don't know if it is, just because he dies to everything, but that's not a reason not to try him. And
would it be better as a 3/5 for 4 Kappa?
If the bonus was +4 +3, then yeah. Yeah, I'll leave it to Overmaster to break this one for me. We'll see what he comes up with. I'm sure he'll find it.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be dreaming about that. And speaking of dreaming, oh god, these transitions are so bad.
I'm literally face palming right now.
I wish I had your guys' webcams here. Aloo Death Dreamer now costs 5 instead of 6. I don't think this card is very powerful. Like, the effect is interesting. Making dudes is nice, but I think the cards that you need to pair with it are really weak, and I don't think this is where any sort of unseen or curse deck really wants to be. Even if it costs 5, I don't think it fixes the problems. Of course, the best thing you can do with this card is play it, and then on the same turn play Permafrost. That's pretty powerful, and it does make it 1 less to do that. But I think in case you don't do that, this card is so low impact as a 2/5. I don't think this fixes the problems the card had. I wouldn't mind being wrong because the card's awesome, but I don't think this fixes anything.
Yeah, I completely agree with GHP on this one. I think this card, the fact that it's only a 2/5 flyer for 5, it's just really bad. If there was like a 3/5 or 4/5 flyer or something like that, a nice warm body to have, right? Instead of something that's just a blocker, right? It needs to have some sort of leverage in combat. It can't just be a flying wall and then you have to get additional value out of it other than being a flying wall. And I don't think it's worth it. Even in the unseen curse deck, quote unquote, the one with Maris, Nightshade, and whatnot, I still don't see Aloo Death Dreamer seeing play. Again, like GHP, I hope I'm proved wrong because the card's kind of cool, right? It makes random skills. I mean, it's at the very least, it's a very fun card, and putting it in being able to actually play it in a fun deck potentially is pretty nice. But I don't think it's going to see competitive play or top level ladder play.
Until we get a couple more constructed, playable, cheap curses, I don't think there's anything to say about this card. Aloo Death Dreamer will remain.
Will remain a dream.
I don't have a transition for Arthropod Instigator. I just have Tears. Arthropod Instigator now costs 2 Shadow. Well, I'd like to take a moment to give a shout out to Ilya, who's probably crying. He's already lost champion of what champion is it?
Champion of Chaos.
He lost champion of Chaos approximately 8 months ago. He really liked that Stone Square mid-range deck, and then we took out its early game. But the real loss today, I'd like to say goodbye, Stone Square aggro. You're fucked.
Yeah.
That's the best card in that deck. Instigator, don't get me wrong, a 2-mana 3/3 with in every deck that plays it, upside is insane. The card is beyond pushed. I get that. The thing is, this card is also like a huge breakpoint. Not only against like other mid-range decks, or say it could attack through or trade with, say, Valkyrie Enforcer, Unseen Commando, Auric Interrogator. You know, cards that cost more than it. Getting free damage when you use removal is nice, especially because in aggressive decks you don't want to spend your turns removing things, but you want to get some value if you do. This Constant Double Shadow basically makes it more of a 3-drop now. This is going to hurt Arge Report a little bit because it really likes playing a 2-drop into Bloodedder or 2-drop into 3-drop, and it makes Instigator on 2 much more difficult, especially Instigator into 3-drop. Stone Scar aggro is probably the real hit here, whereas other 2-drop options are like Rakano Outlaw, which is quite a step down from Instigator. Especially in like aggro mirrors where Instigator could say block and Oni running. I think this card is still playable. I just think it's more of a mid-range card now instead of a super aggressive card. Like, I still think it probably sees play in Arge Report. Maybe Stone Scar just takes the lump on it, plays like 1 or 2 extra shadow sources and just play it. I'm not sure, but it's definitely going to impact deck building, and I think the card definitely got worse with this nerf.
I agree. I'd like to point out that Instigator is was completely an overpowered card. I mean, if this game was to move forward, I think that it was probably going to have to be changed. It was whether or not it was going to be a 3/2 or instead, or you know, the damage only affecting you or something like that, which I think defeated the purpose of the card, to be honest. I think it wanted to be that kind of card that was very overpowered and that pushes damage a lot, right? And the fact that it costs 2 shadow now is, you know, it's pretty significant. I mean, it's still going to come down on turn 2 a lot. I don't know, like with the crests and whatnot, with having, you know, in both Argent Mid, which is where, and Stone Scar Aggro, which is where it's being run, you had 12 ways, you have 12 ways, or 12 dual lands basically to get this down on turn 2. It's just going to affect your turn 1 play a lot. It's going to be harder to get both a turn 1 play in. Like a fire card like Pyro Knight or Oni Ronin and Instigator in. It's just going to be very, very difficult to get that in, which slows down aggro, which, I mean, as much as people love aggro, I think that it was getting kind of ridiculous on ladder. I just think that the curve of Stone Star decks was just very, very was a little too strong. On ladder, at least. In a best of ones, obviously in tournament play. Aggro decks are not as represented because you have ways to combat aggro in your sideboard and whatnot. You don't have to go. The aggro deck has to go all in. The other decks don't have to. Blah blah blah. Yeah, I think that Instigator got a huge nerf here. It was needed. It was whether or not which spot it was going to be nerfed in.
I think that the most Stone Scar aggro decks are gonna switch to a more shadow-based 1-drops, and I see them. They're still gonna play this card. It's too good not to play. It's just gonna break up their curve. You know, Oni into Instigator into Champion and into Queen. Like that's basically the biggest change. It's gonna make them work more for turn 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am very curious to see where that card goes. One card that I'm very surprised to see a change about, and it's why we mentioned the Echo Macro deck. Stone Powder Alchemist now costs 3 mana. This is huge. This is absolutely huge. One of the biggest issues the Echo Macro deck currently had is its curve was like absolutely abysmal. And this gave it an actual 3-drop, which, if I'm not mistaken, it didn't have any. Or at least, like, ones that involved developing. I think this is a change that will help push that deck a lot. I also think this card is now better as a not, like, Echo Macro card, like, as a standalone card. I can easily see, like, I don't know, Argent playing it in their sideboard over, say, Copperhull Bailiff, because it's also good against Armory, while still being good against aggro. I think this card is a lot more playable now. I think the card is still, like, not an absolute all-star or anything. It is a Gunslinger, which is a nice buff, which we're going to talk about Gunslingers in a minute here. in the Argentport tribe, but I think the card definitely got a significant buff, and it's going to help push the Echo Mactor deck maybe onto my tier list. Like, it might be like a tier 2 deck now, because that deck is scary. Especially when it's a lot more consistent, and it doesn't just die as easily to aggro.
I agree with everything you just said. I just like to point out that Stoneforge Alchemist was probably, it was probably playable as a 4-mana 2/2 lifesteal that dealt 2 damage before. Like it felt like it was very playable, just on the very verge of it. And now with this this upgrade, it just shoots it definitely into playable territory. I don't know. I think control decks might just run this. It just like you said, it affects so many matchups. Like it kills aggro decks. I mean, not that aggro decks are gonna. I think people are gonna be scared about playing aggro for a little while. I think the Instigator buff is like it's going to affect it initially for sure. And so Alchemist may not be as needed as much, but it definitely affects aggro matchups. And the ability to get rid of both unbuff sort of Icarias and Rune Hammers is just absolutely a very, very powerful thing, just as a standalone card. And then, of course, its interaction and having not just Echo Macto, by the way, like just having a bunch of revenge cards in your deck is just they kind of compound on each other. So having some Power Alchemist be a buff here. As much as the community is sort of divided on revenge, I think that we're going to see more just straight up revenge decks in the future.
Yep, you guys said it all. I think there's an issue with like they're buffing cards in Argentport, whereas everyone thinks that's the class that needs most nerfs. But I don't know if this affects mid range at all. They have better themes. But yeah, Echo Macto is probably going to turn into a real deck. It's probably going to be 3 factions, and it's probably going to give a lot of people headaches. And it's worth noting that this is a gunslinger, and gunslinger decks might become a thing with the addition of the next card we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so let's move into the Duskrow buffs. This one's been hiding out on us for a little while since it's been released. Oh my god. But Hideout Pistol is now +2 attack. I think this card was already pretty good, but like in the Gunslinger deck, obviously it's crap otherwise. But now I think this card is really good in the Argentport Gunslingers, or I guess any Shadow Gunslinger deck. If there's a Gunslinger deck to be had, this card goes in it because it's really good. I don't really have much to say. This was a buff that I didn't actually think was that needed. And when you buff cards that I didn't think needed to be buffed, that's kind of scary. I think this card's very good. The question is, can the cards around it pull their own weight?
Yeah, I always was surprised by how effective Hideout Pistol was when it was just played on curve, right? It just destroys everything that it comes into play, basically. It just in your Gunslinger deck, it just destroys everything on the opposing side of the board. Usually you're playing things on curve, and then you play this the next turn, and it just destroys whatever they have, right? Their biggest unit. Sometimes you won't get a Titan or something like that, but other than that, it usually gets whatever it targets in. Now it's just going to do that more often. I see a Gunslinger's deck being very, very powerful moving forward. It could be Argentport. It could be a well, obviously not Rakano, because that doesn't go into anyway. It could be the 3-faction one. If you finagle the mana base, the JFS one, yeah, that one. I think we're going to see some Gunslingers moving forward because of this card.
Yeah, I agree. It's something. It's not a major buff, but it's definitely enough to make this possibly constructed playable. I don't know if Argentport wants a Gunslinger deck. Like, they've got a better mid-range deck. I think you might be able to get something going in Stone Scar, but I'm not sure. And if Gunslingers does work, this card's going to be a part of it.
Damn it, Overmaster.
It's not me.
Wait, that's Toes?
That's our Puerto Rican friend over here.
Well, that was wonderful from Missing Toes. I guess we should continue. I think the best thing for us to do with these desk row buffs is what cards do we want to talk about. I think Survivalist is just not a powerful enough card. I don't think the effect is that good. Yes, being easier to cast is obviously a buff. I don't think the card is good enough to see play in Constructed, even if it was 9 Shadow instead of 9 Shadow.
So if you have a 5 power gunslinger somehow, which usually doesn't happen, but let's say it has a weapon on it, right? The Callous Survivalist comes down for like 4 or 5 very, very often, right? That's a pretty powerful effect for 4 or 5, even if it exhausts a unit comes into play. And it like takes away their 2 removal spells, so they have no chance of coming back. I think Callous Survivalist is actually pretty good. And the thing is, now it costs double shadow. Before it cost triple shadow, so it definitely couldn't be splashing that fire shadow. Fire Shadow Justice deck, right? Now it actually has a place in that deck because I think you can easily build a mana base to be able to splash this card in that deck.
I think that's a good point. It's one of those cards that I never crafted, and I do think one day I want to see like what is the most powerful thing this card can do, and see how often you can do it. My only concern though is like you mentioned a 5 power gunslinger. How is that not dead yet? If you're actually going to hit something from it, unless it was like turn 4 and I'm sat there with double harsh rule, maybe. But a lot of the times, you're going to get my spells before you actually get the effect, and that's kind of my concern. I do think the effect is powerful. So let's move on to Scavenger. So it's the ultimate costing 4. I think is a big deal. My only concern though is the body sucks. 2-mana 1/3 Warcry is not good. It's also not a Valkyrie, which means it doesn't turn on the Valkyrie synergies, even though, yes, it lets you draw a Valkyrie from the void. I don't think this card's particularly good. I think I'd rather play Dark Return if this was a slot I was looking for in a Valkyrie deck. And the Valkyrie deck isn't looking for Dark Return currently. I think there are better 2-drops, and I think there are better utility cards than Scavenger.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just think the fact that this is a Minotaur Grunt with upside is just not powerful enough. I just don't think it's powerful enough. Even with the ability to pay for to Dark Return, quote unquote, a Valkyrie. I don't think paying 2 and then paying 4 to return a Valkyrie that you already died, where you can just pay 1 to just Dark Return it anyway. And like you said, it's just not the deck's not looking to return its Valkyries, and this doesn't really do it any more effectively than Dark Return.
All right, Inquisitors, Halberd. Welcome back, Toes. So 3 mana 3/1 weapon is pretty shit. 3 mana 3/4 weapon is pretty good. I think this card is now held back by the fact that there are basically no good Valkyries that cost less than 3. Which means you can't curve Valkyrie into this, kill your 2 or 3 drop, that still have a weapon left over. You can't do that. And yes, this buff is nice, but I think this card is held back by cards around it, not by the power level of this card. I think if we had cheaper Valkyries, I think this would be a good card in a Valkyrie's deck. I think the +3 armor effect is nice. I don't think it's good enough right now with the cards around it.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, the best Valkyries we have to curve into this are what? Valkyrie Aspirant. That's not a good card.
Yeah.
Stalwart Silverwing. I mean, while Revenge is nice, I think that of every single Revenge card, I think that Silverwing is probably one of the worst for constructed. I don't think that you want to be playing. I don't think you want to be playing cards that are not constructed worthy just to make a card that's, probably constructed worthy, but it's like very close. To try to make that into a thing. I don't think that that's something that will happen. I mean, to be fair, you can play something like a Valkyrie Enforcer on curve, or any 3-drop Valkyrie. There are a couple ones like the Sadistic Valkyrie is not too bad. Yeah, I mean, Valkyries are supposed to be expensive. They're supposed to be big things. They're supposed to be, a part of the storyline and whatnot. I don't think we're going to be getting cheap Valkyries to trigger this, and I don't think it's going to be good otherwise.
If you're in Argenport, you have Runehammer. This will never see play.
That's also what I was thinking. Like,
That's
especially
true.
if we're like we want to play Enforcer, then this card that wrong curve out.
You never play this over Runehammer.
So, Clutch Keeper now cost 1 less. Next? Question mark?
Whoop-de-woo. Next.
Alright, thanks guys.
This card, no.
Yeti Furlinger.
Furflinger.
Fuck.
Furlinger. Oh my god.
I'm looking at it through OBS, not looking at my desktop, so I'm seeing it smaller.
Okay.
That's my excuse, okay?
Yeah, well, plus nobody's ever played this card, but I think now that it doesn't die to torch, they might.
It's 6 mana Sursa's meddling with flying.
But it's 3 mana. It's a 3-drop, right?
It's a 3-drop, but they all cost 6.
It also costs triple primal.
That's fine.
I think this card's really bad.
You're playing primal. You're already playing sub cards. Like, how's this any different?
Okay. I think this buff doesn't fix the problems that this card has, and that's that it's so expensive for it to actually be useful. 3 mana 3/3 is not constructed playable. 3 mana 3/4 is still not constructed playable if you don't get the effect off. I don't think this fixes any of the problems the Yeti's deck have either. I think I'd rather play Polymorph if I needed that effect that bad.
Yeah, I agree. Yep, I don't think this card is constructed playable still.
I want it to be, but it's probably not.
I mean, it's a cute card for sure, but yeah.
Gearmaster.
Next.
Yeah. I don't care what anybody says about this card.
This doesn't fix.
3 mana 1/1. A 3 mana 1/1 is just not good.
This doesn't fix any of the problems.
I guess if you're not playing Dawnwalker anymore, this in instead.
Play Champ. Amber Acolyte. Someone name a random 3-drop. Go.
Any 3-drop.
You're playing a Sentinel. A Sentinel is a big fatty.
Yeah.
Like the fact that
Sentinel's a 4-drop.
Yeah, unless you start on Titan right after. Like, okay, you play this, play Titan. If that Titan can hold the fort, sure, you did your job, you drew a card, you're now 2/2. If Titan can't hold the fort, you're dead.
Yeah.
Well,
not good.
Toyer's intervention, I think this was a draft change really, but gain 4 health is not good. Silence an enemy unit instead of an attacking enemy unit that's good, good-ish, but it's still just putting a bunch of weak cards onto one card and hoping that the flexibility is good enough. And I don't think the flexibility is good enough for this card. I don't think this card's going to see the light of day.
I'm not sure about that. I actually think that being able to silence something at instant speed for 1 mana is actually a pretty powerful effect.
Yeah, I agree. This card was already a decent late pick. Like you're not gonna pick this in the first 3 or 4 picks, but after that, you're happy to pick up a Taliyah's intervention.
Are we talking about draft?
Both.
I think it might be constructed playable. On the verge, maybe in a sideboard or something like that, right? But it just has so many flexible things to do, especially in like a Life Force deck or something like that. Like it's. It can bounce. It can save it. What can it save even? It saves either Sentinels or Explorers, right? So it can save your Titan for removal spells. Just
both.
Yeah. So, and now it gains 4 health instead of 3. I mean, that's not relevant. Let's be honest here. That's not actually relevant. And then the fact that it can instant speed hit anything like a flyer or something like that, bring it out of the air, blah blah blah. I think that's pretty powerful, and having them all 3 together is not bad. But it's definitely not going to see main deck play for sure.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure.
I definitely think it's a buff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously.
All right, next one, Scrap Hound. Now it gets +5/+5 instead of +4/+4. I think if this card was going to be good enough to see play, a 1 mana druid that could become a 1 mana 5/5. is not really much better than a 1-mana 6/6. You know, excluding the cost it actually costs to do this. I don't think this fixes the problem the card has, and that's the fact that it's a 1-mana 1/1 with no effect until like the board stalls or something. I don't think this fixes any of the problems. I don't think this card's very good.
To be fair, I think this is more of a draft upgrade than a
Yes.
than a constructed upgrade. I don't think this card will ever see constructed play in any capacity. But I think that it's actually pretty powerful. It would probably be powerful in draft if I knew anything about the format.
Yeah, it'll never see the light of day in constructed, but it just made a decent fire draft card better. They needed some help.
All right. Speaking of Fire's draft card, Caleb's intervention. Now actually hitting relics is relevant. Think this might be a decent sideboard card, but is it better than Ruin?
I mean, not at doing what it's supposed to do, but
like none of the modes are that good.
Yeah, I think the fact that this is not fast spell is actually what really hurts this a lot. If it was fast spell, it'd probably be better than, for example, it would be what's the 2-mana +3/+1 overwhelm one?
Rampage.
Rampage.
Yeah, Rampage. Yeah. It would be better than that, right? So they would have to adjust.
It'd be better than Pummel. Let's be honest. It'd be better than Pummel.
Yeah. If they made it fast spell, but I think the only way this was going to see constructed play is if it was a fast spell, and since it's not going to see constructed play. I don't think.
Okay.
Yep. Never see the light of day. You play it in fire. Like you want to create grenadins, you want to kill weapons. That's fine. You pick it very late, but. That's it.
Alright, so we have one more constructed card to talk about. And it's going to be the new promo card. So let's talk about Bloodsent Avasar. If we actually want to, because it's hot trash.
Do we have to? Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is it found?
Can you link me that? Oh, no.
It's in our chat. Yeah. Why is it found?
Yeah, the fact that it's found makes it even
if
worse than what it already is.
If this was a Legion, I wouldn't be saying this. But
if it was, even if it was in Xenon, it might actually see more play than in Feln. I don't know.
Yeah, Feln had nothing.
I have no idea why this. I have no idea the reason why.
Well, we know. Go ahead.
It is a 3-mana 3/3 flyer with Nightfall.
Yeah, that's actually not bad. It's just like the Fate ability is not very relevant. And the fact is the colors is the problem. And there's no way you just play this in like a Feln deck.
Yeah, there's no dinosaurs in Feln.
No, but I just mean like a 3-mana 3/3 flyer Nightfall is not good enough for like a Feln constructed deck.
Nope.
Yeah.
I don't think this card's particularly exciting.
Does it give things in play the +1 attack, or does it give itself, for example, the +1 attack?
I think it's in play.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. I think the important thing about this card is it confirmed that Dinosaurs is a 3-faction tribe.
Right. Well, we already knew that because of the legendary, the Shadow Legendary in the Dusk Road. I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
I've never seen it in the wild.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So we know that. I just don't think this fixes any problem that any of the dinosaur decks have. Card's cool. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's go ahead.
I might have one more card to discuss.
Oh, does it cost 5 mana?
Moo.
Moo.
He's moving on up in the rankings here, boys. Tavrod didn't get nerfed. Or Argentport, really.
Well,
slight nerf. Yeah.
Yeah, but you probably want Shadow on one board anyways.
Yeah, and you can play up to 12 duelists. Instigator nerf is not a big deal. Just Argentport, tier 1. Let's go.
Might be tier 0 now.
Yeah. They nerfed some of the cards around it. That's why people aren't happy. It's not, if they buff cards that were good against Tavrod potentially, for example, or the decks, then we wouldn't be complaining as much. The problem is they took the decks that are good against Tavrod and they just start throwing rocks at him and seeing how far they would fall.
Yep. I think Akaria Blue is the only reasonable counter.
Yeah, and that deck is...
At this point. It's hit and miss. I mean, it's getting better. builds are getting more refined.
Yeah, if
People are
that deck
making-
is drawing decently, like we're in. One thing to know is that deck probably doesn't play Lightning Storm anymore, at least in tournaments.
No,
Like
I don't know if it does.
I
on the
think the
latter.
best aggro deck right now is Rakano. And I don't think
Okay.
Rakano is good, which means Harsh Rule is no longer Lightning Storm is no longer good.
Nope.
Oh well, I mean, if you have both Lightning Storm and Devastating Setback in the same deck, they might combo with each other a little bit more, right? I mean, that's probably a thing. But yeah,
I mean, if you have that, why wouldn't you just play Stray into Shadow?
Yeah.
True.
All right, let's look at the draft changes, and then we'll look at the game changes. So, cards changed in draft. Basically, Justice was known to be the best stuff. So they made Valkyrie. They took two of the best Justice cards, Valkyrie Arcanist and Frontier Confessor, and changed them a little bit, nerfed them, and then they changed Emerald Spear for some random reason, in my opinion. I think the Arcanist is still very good in draft. I think Confessor is also fine, but not like pick it when you see it. I think this might help balance draft a little bit. I still think Arcanist is just a problem. I don't think the Emerald Spear is that relevant. I don't think it's a nerf or a buff. I think it's just a change. I don't really think this fixes draft, though, honestly.
I just found the draft format to be stale. It's not that Justice is overpowered. There are formats in Magic that have had things overpowered and whatnot, and the formats were fine, right? It's just that this format it's trying to do too many things. I think that's the major part of this draft format that's kind of bad, is that you have all the tribal synergies in two sets, buried in two sets, and there's nothing in other sets, right? And that's just huge. The removal is in sets 2 and 1, and not really in set 3. There's pretty much no removal in that set. I think the parts about draft, like I don't think you can actually fix this draft format until you did four threes or something like 4 set threes, 3 packs or something like that. I just don't think that the draft format is technically fixable in this sense. But you know what? I haven't really played the format, so I don't know much about it.
The major problem remains the only good removal in 2 of your 4 packs is Injustice still, in Entrapment. So I don't know how much this is going to affect that aspect of the draft format. Valkyrie Arcanist is still powerful. It's still going to be an early pick. Frontier Confessor is still a decent card, still going to be a mid pick. It's just not going to be a signal that you should be Injustice if you see it early like it used to be. And Emerald Spear, I have no idea why they touched that card.
Alright, so going through the other part of the notes, new puzzles, which is great. Apparently there's a new achievement, which means I need that.
Oh god, I love the puzzles. The puzzles were one of my favorite things about this game, and they added more.
Pack passing and draft has been updated. There are multiple card balance updates. Oh, we already talked about that.
Well, we didn't talk about the pick order changing.
All right.
The pass order changing.
It used to be that packs 1 and 3 were from the same people, and 2 and 4 were the same people. Now 1 and 4 will be the same, and 2 and 3 will be the same. What this means is both set 3 packs are now going to be for the same person. That
will help a lot with signaling. And there's a major problem in the old draft format where, the synergies that you want in pack 1 are being cut from you in pack 4 because you have no control over them. I think that's a major change, and there's also this line in the notes that players will now also have more control over the player passing to them for Omens of the Past and Empty Throne. I don't know what that means, but that sounds good.
Well, you can control the way
but the more control. That's the part I don't. I'd like them to be a little more specific, but Direwolf and communications never been their strongest suit.
I don't think they can tell you about that though. That involves algorithms and things of this nature, right? I don't think yeah, I don't think they want to reveal their algorithms for this kind of thing. But that's
they could have gave us a little more than the most vague comments possible. That's all. I don't need the math behind it. I just a little more explanation than one.
I just think that if they provided any more explanation, it would require math.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I was told there would be no math.
Well, this is something that I'm just going to say this because I've been told this in the past. Apparently, some members for DWD have watched my videos before. And this seems like something they might watch. So I'm going to just offer this now. If someone from DWD wants to sit down and talk about balance, either on stream or off stream, please hit one of us up.
Please.
I would be so down.
We will be kind. We will do you justice. Please come talk to us.
Like, we love this game. Please don't make us hate ourselves with Arch Report or anything.
Yeah, I would like a little more of an explanation of why AP Mid was not kicked to the curb or something like that, right? Like, yeah, I think that this game is one of the best games I've ever played, and having it go out because of a silly patch that didn't nerf Tavrod or something like that. I don't necessarily think Tavrod needed the nerf. I think AP Mid needed nerf, but like it's. I just need I need more of an explanation of why they didn't target that deck.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's nothing else really to talk about. There are like bug fixes and stuff, but they don't really, they shouldn't matter in a review.
Pummel no longer triggers a fast spell target or whatever.
That was annoying.
Yeah.
So
you guys played decks with Pummel
in draft, and I've played it in constructed. But I want to say thank you to both the Overmaster and Missing Toes for joining us today. I enjoyed recording this. This is probably much more entertaining than if I had to do this by myself. I'd be saying statutory maiden the whole time.
Which can be entertaining in its own respect, but I mean...
Do me a favor, GHP. What are the little robots that mine shifts?
You cut out.
You cut out.
I said, what are the little robots that mine shifts? What are they called?
Grenadids?
Oh wow, he did
he
it.
Said it right. Damn. All right. He knew it was on the spot.
What do I normally call it?
Grenadins?
Are you serious?
Yeah.
To be fair, that's probably a common mistake. Statutory versus statuary. That's
not excusable.
That's the joke, though.
Yeah, just like pinky up when I drink things. All right, so thank you guys for joining us, and I guess we'll see you guys next time.